Do you remember during the offseason when all we heard from the national media was how bad the Chicago Bears were going to be this season? Well, that's exactly what we saw in that embarrassing Thursday night football loss to the Washington Commanders.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook or join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. Also, make sure to subscribe to the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today and hopefully every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. On the show today, we have to talk about and recap a bad Bears loss to the Washington Commanders on Thursday Night Football. We'll talk about the embarrassment that was that game that we watched on field and how much of a blown opportunity it felt like for Chicago in a prime time stage. We'll check in on Justin Fields in what was, up until the last drive of the game, what felt like a pretty bad performance, but finally sort of went full sicko mode on that last drive and had them right in position to potentially score and win that game. And we'll wrap up with some positives, mainly focused on the defense and the two running backs that were some of the few players in this game that actually had good games for the Chicago Bears. But this game was nothing short of an embarrassment. I mean, it was borderline disastrous. And for me, we talked about it last week. I'm used to these being Monday podcast post-game shows. We talked about it earlier in the week, right? In the lead up for this Washington game. The Bears needed to come in this game and show the rest of the NFL that, hey, the Commanders, they're the truly bad teams in the NFL. Like, the Commanders are a team, this is a team that looks like they'll be picking top 5. And the Bears needed to come in on Thursday and say, no, this franchise is not that. This franchise might not be a playoff team this season, but this franchise is not swirling down the toilet the way the Washington Commanders have looked pretty much this entire season. And you add on top of that entering this game, a huge expose investigative journalism report from ESPN about all the wild things their owner is doing to try and keep from selling his team, despite all the allegedly awful things that he's done as owner of the Washington Commanders. And this week, you had Ron Rivera talk about, call out Carson Wentz, maybe inadvertently or accidentally say, yeah, quarterback's the thing that separates from the team. Like, they had all the controversy in the world surrounding them and a short week, and the team is injured. And there was every reason for the Bears, yes, coming off a loss against Minnesota, but at least a game that you felt encouraged about the way they came back. They were riding the second half momentum of that game into this game, even a little bit healthier than they were last week with Jalen Johnson coming back. Like, everything was in the Bears' favor. Not that I thought they needed to come in and blow them out 35-0, right? That was never the expectation. But for 4 quarters, you were supposed to show that you are in a different class of NFL franchises from the true bottom feeders, like the Washington Commanders right now, or what the Detroit Lions have been for a long time, or what we've seen some of from the Falcons and Jets, although they've had some more ups this season, right? You would just separate yourself and say, hey, the Bears are better than those teams. And clearly, 4 quarters, or at least 3 quarters and 13 minutes of that game were proof after proof after proof that this Bears team is bad. This is a bad football team that should be embarrassed and ashamed of itself from losing to a team that I think is or should be worse. Like, the Commanders are a truly bad football team. Yeah, they have more talent than the Bears at wide receiver. Certainly, like, you can go position by position and find things that the Commanders are better at. That's not the point, right? The point is that that's a team that's lost 4 games in a row and is in a full tailspin, and the Bears have been a good enough second half team to be right in it at the very end of every single contest. And yes, they were right in it at the very end of this contest, but being right in it with a what was a 1-4 Washington Commanders team is very different than being right in it at the end against a 4-1 Minnesota Vikings team or a now 4-1 New York Giants team, right? Not that those two are either one of them are Super Bowl contenders, right? But this was inexcusable. It was inexcusable to lose to them in any fashion. This was a game you absolutely, not that it was a must win, but it was just like, you should win. Like, this is like as easy as it's going to get on your schedule. If you can't beat the Washington Commanders of the world, right? You struggle to beat the Houston Texans of the world. That's the level that this Bears team is on right now. When you start looking at the rest of the schedule, and it's like, well, the Patriots are better than the Commanders, the Cowboys, maybe the Dolphins, depending on the quarterback situation. I mean, there's a lot of teams on this schedule that are clearly better football teams than the Washington Commanders. And it starts to feel more and more bleak as you look and say, geez, like this team, I mean, how many more games are they going to win this season? I'm not saying they're not going to win any more games, but holy criminies, you can't get any offense going against Washington. I mean, you struggle in the red zone every single time down the field. It took a deep shot bomb from Fields on a free play. It was a great throw and a great catch from Dante Pettis. Absolutely. Give him credit where credit's due. But you are just so anemic when you're that close to the goal line on multiple occasions. And it's never just one thing, right? It's never just, Justin Fields misses the tight end open in the flat. It's never just, the offensive line allows a sack and it's terrible protection for Justin Fields. It's never just, the wide receiver bobbles the pass and is hit out of the end zone before he can catch it. Or, there's pass interference and the receiver still drops the pass, in the end zone there, right? It's never just one thing holding this Bears team back. It's always something different. And that's the sign of a truly all-around bad football team. If the receivers were making plays and catching all the passes and Fields was delivering balls and it was just the offensive line, okay, you could look at it and say, there's a hole here, but the ship's not sinking. But this was an offense that sunk, that everything at once that could go wrong would go wrong. And once Fields started figuring out, the receiver started dropping the passes. And once the offensive line protection was better, Fields was inaccurate on some of those throws. Like, it was just always something going wrong, and it's a sign of the team not being good. And the thing that I keep coming back to is every loss after a game, right? We hear Matt Eberflus or Luke Getsy or Justin Fields say, yeah, we got to execute better. We need better execution. And what that really means, what we need to start hearing that as, translate when you hear the word execution from a Bears coach or player, what it means is we need better football players. It means our players aren't good enough. You're saying, that was a good play call. The play worked. We just have to execute it better. That means our players aren't good enough. Our players are bad, and the players need to be better. And that's the reality of this Bears team, 6 games into this 2022 season. They have bad football players. They might have bad football coaches, but sometimes it's hard to tell when you have bad football players. And I think it's a little bit too soon to decide whether or not they have good or bad football coaches when it's clear that you do for sure have a lot of bad football players. Certainly too soon to decide whether or not you have a bad quarterback in the long term, but some real concerning moments from Justin Fields in this game before we got to some really exciting moments at the very end. We'll kind of look more holistically at his performance coming off of some positives last week against the Minnesota Vikings next on Locked On Bears. These days, every potential new hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. But our friends at LinkedIn Jobs are here to help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. You want to be certain, 100% certain, that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. And LinkedIn makes it super easy. You post your job for free at LinkedIn Jobs, and they have simple tools like screening questions that make it super easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you want to interview and who you want to hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. Millions of people use LinkedIn every day. I'm on LinkedIn. You might be on LinkedIn as well. Post at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I want to be very sure or very mindful that we don't overreact to any one individual Justin Fields performance as indicative of what his career is going to be or what's going to happen next or where he is going. Because if we said it once, we'll say it 1,000 times. Quarterback development is not linear. It's not like you get better against the Vikings and then you've reached that point and you're good to go, right? Or you get better against the Vikings and you get better every single game. There will be progress. There will be steps back. There will be more progress from there, and there will be steps back from there. The idea is that over time, that you're still trending in the positive direction, that you're not still at zero, that as you go up and down, you end up getting more up. And even when you take a step down, you're still eventually having net positive over that extended period of time. And so I think after Justin Fields played so well in the second half against Minnesota, right? 12 of 13, 135 yards and a touchdown. Felt like he had settled in. He was seeing the field well, making good decisions with the ball, staying in the pocket, good pocket presence. I think we all kind of came into Washington saying, okay, kind of washing our hands clean, like he figured it out. Good to go, right? Like Fields will be set. It clicked. All right, things should be set now against a bad Washington secondary. Absolutely. And certainly we expected better, and we should have expected better than what we saw against Washington. But I think it's important to say, like, we weren't likely to get another, 12 of 13 type half from Fields coming just right in this game and picking up right where he left off there. No, there was always going to be some amount of drop-off. But maybe not this amount of drop-off. Because what was particularly concerning to me watching it live was just the blatant, pure inaccuracy of some of the passes. Right, like he was always a very accurate quarterback in college, and we've seen him have some really nice accuracy on downfield throws. And we certainly saw the Dante Pettis touchdown was a great throw downfield. Like he's still able to do some of that, but there were too many throws in that game where it just felt like he just missed the guy. Like he just flat out missed the receiver. I mean, no more important, no more critical than on the goal line where they had the fake handoff, then the fake wide receiver verse, and you had the tight end sort of swinging out of the backfield wide open, and Fields floats it in front of him just too far. And it's like he's not under pressure on that play. The pocket was there. He had his feet under him. I think he kind of rushed his feet and didn't fully step into it, and I think that's part of why it sailed there. I need to watch the All-22 to really see for sure, but that's what it looked like to me watching live. But, you got to hit those. We know Fields is not a precision, pinpoint accuracy, timing, three-step drop underneath West Coast receiver in that way. We need to make sure our expectations are proper here, but he was missing throws, especially early in this game, that you expect not only any NFL quarterback to make, but Fields as well. We've seen him hit those throws, and that's part of why I'm not, ringing all the alarms and raising all the flags of holy crap, he's all of a sudden broken again, like as though something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. It felt to me a little bit less not that I'm willing to wave it off as an anomaly, but one game, right? One bad game, but he will have more bad games and he will have more good games. And that's part of this process with Fields. So I'm not panicking yet, but I think it's important to be realistic about where he is after a game like this, because, I don't blame the interception. I mean, it hits a guy in the helmet, and in the red zone like that, you have to adjust your arm angle to fit that ball in. I mean, it's a tight window over the middle of the field, and he's trying to get it sort of to the outside of Cole Kmet, and so Fields is trying to bend his arm around to get the ball to the outside, which makes it a lower release point, which ends up hitting the helmet. The fact that it hits the helmet, I think, makes it sound or look more embarrassing or more concerning, but it bounces up in the air. If that ball falls incomplete, no one's talking about it today, right? And he had other batted passes in this game. That's just a reality of playing quarterback in the NFL, and certainly there's things quarterbacks can do to manipulate that, but I'm not worried about the specific of the interception in this game, but it was just the incomplete passes where it felt like he was just flat out inaccurate, throwing the ball behind receiver here or too far in front there. And then his pocket presence, again, regressed back a bit. That's what felt like that was the most meaningful progress for me from the Minnesota Vikings game, was that against the Vikings, he could feel pressure really well, could stay in the pocket, could step up around pressure without tucking the ball, lowering his eyes and running. And in this game, it felt like it was right back to panic mode Fields. Need to see the All-22 to really get a good grasp of how often it happened, but I took notes on a few specific plays where, especially when they show the replay, you can see the pocket is holding up. It has not collapsed, and he is still scrambling out of the pocket. Pass protection was not good in this game. Let me make these two things. These two things can be true at the same time. The pass protection was not good, and the Washington Commanders Almost lost it there. The Washington Commanders got a lot of pressure on Fields, and he did not have nearly consistent enough pass protection. That is a true statement. It is also a true statement that there were plays in this game when individually the offensive line held up enough and Fields left a pocket before the pass protection had broken down, that he was either making a read and it's not open and he's choosing to run with it that way, or he's feeling pressure that's not there. I think it's probably a combination of both happening on different occasions, but that was a place where he had seemed to make so much progress against the Vikings, and we have stepped back in this game. Again, it's one game. He's allowed to have bad games. It doesn't look good, doesn't feel good, but like he can also then still have better games from here, and it doesn't have to be an indictment on him as a long-term quarterback prospect. I think for a lot of national media people who didn't watch maybe any Bears games this season and just watched what we saw on Thursday Night Football, it's going to color a lot of the analysis we hear about Fields from here on out, because they're going to say, oh, he played that one bad game. And yes, you don't want him to have any of those bad games, but it's not a fully indicative evaluation of where he is as a quarterback at this stage. And we saw that in the fourth quarter on that last drive, the way, he's able to, break out of sacks and get the ball moving forward past the first down, completes a couple of nice passes in the game. And of course, the scramble for 39 yards into the red zone, right? Like, he is a player who's clutch, who can turn it on when he absolutely needs it to. And he threw what were probably multiple touchdown passes, neither of which were caught, one of which had pass interference on it that was not called. You can't blame this game on the refs, certainly. You can be mad at the refs, but the Bears lost this game themselves. You cannot say, oh man, that ref cost the Bears this game. No, you scored 7 points on the Washington Commanders. That's why you lost the game, not one pass interference flag not thrown by a ref, because that pass interference flag would give them first and goal at the 1, and I don't know that they would have scored with 4 more tries, because obviously they couldn't score on 4 tries on that drive and multiple tries late or earlier in the game where they just could not get anything done. Absolutely constipated offensively. All of it makes it hard to find positives, and I think it also does overlook what was otherwise a fairly decent defensive performance. You hold any team to 12 points, and you should be able to win that game. The defense did its job, but there's always things the defense can do to improve. We'll try and find some of the positives and look at some of the guys that did stand out and some of the other takeaways from this Bears defense next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline, the #1 source for all of your football betting information this season. The line was hovering between Pick'em and Bears -1 for a lot of this game. Certainly, there was always money to be made on picking the Commanders in this game. The over-under started at like 38, and we finished with 19 points in this game. So I think there was never a line for the under that was not reached. So you could have made a lot of money betting for a low-scoring game and a windy one between two bad teams with our friends at BetOnline. They've got all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, in-depth articles, and analysis on every game you can find across every sports. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of them. So head on over to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more about all the different trends and action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. The positives in this game have to start with the Bears defense, right? At the end of the day, you hold any team 12 points. That's a W for the defense. It should be a W for the whole team if you have anything close to an NFL offense. Well, you heard at halftime, Tony Gonzalez said these are 2 JV teams, and it was almost more like freshman teams. It was definitely like a freshman high school performance of offense with a bunch of professional athletes on the field in this one. But defensively, right, the return of Jalen Johnson, so welcome. I mean, he made a couple of really great pass breakups in this one and got flagged for a fairly ticky-tacky defensive pass interference. I mean, he did grab the jersey, right? I mean, it was, by the rule, by the letter of the law, a violation of the rules. I do think it's something that many players get away with quite often. And so I'm not going to say terrible call because, again, by the book, yeah, probably. But in practice, it's not often called that way. But otherwise, really thought Jalen Johnson made himself known. I mean, that pass breakup in the end zone against Terry McLaurin, where he doesn't even have to, he doesn't look back at it because he doesn't have time to, but just puts his hands up and doesn't touch the receiver. I mean, clearly, about as clean of a pass breakup without even looking back at the ball as you can have from Jalen Johnson there. Really, really nice to see. We also saw, I won't say it was a great game from Kyler Gordon without seeing the all-22, but the play that stands out was that weird triple option throwback screenplay where they had 3 blockers in front of the running back, and Kyler Gordon somehow split all of them to make what was a touchdown saving tackle at the time. I mean, that was a really nice play and kind of showed a lot of his instincts on that side of the ball. And, I got to give a lot of credit to defensive coordinator Alan Williams. Right? The Bears are not only a low percentage blitzing team in general, but they're also near the bottom of the league in blitzing on third downs. And they clearly had a lot of tendency breakers in this game, right? I think Washington wasn't expecting them to blitz nearly as much as they did on third down. And those blitzes got home, right? I mean, they got 3 sacks on Carson Wentz. It was Roquan Smith, it was Jaquan Brisker, and then Al-Qadim Muhammad technically was sort of the cleanup sack on another one. But 2 of those sacks coming from linebackers and DBs that don't normally rush the passer, right? Evidence of those blitzes being able to get home. And they got a couple other hits on Carson Wentz as well. Now, you can always get more pressure on the quarterback, and certainly the run defense was not necessarily where you wanted it to be in this game. But like the only reason they end up giving up that touchdown was off of the muffed punt from Bayless Jones. And I didn't mean to leave him out of the criticism of this podcast, but there's a reason, right? They put Treston Ebner on that last kickoff return. I don't think we're going to see Bayless Jones punt return next week. Matt Eberflus said after the game, like, your number one job is catch the ball. We got to catch the ball. I think they're going to sit him down on the punt return duties at least for one more week. He knows he messed up. That was just embarrassing. I mean, it's redundant to rip into Bayless Jones. We all kind of get it and how absolutely disastrous that was for this Bears team. 2 weeks in a row, maybe costing them wins. Because if he doesn't muff that, do the Bears give up a touchdown on that drive instead of a field goal? I mean, then it might be, 9-7 instead of 12-7. But then the Bears could kick a field goal when they get into the goal line and don't get in, as opposed to having to go for a touchdown on 4th and goal. So it's potentially could have been the difference in the game there. Not willing to blame this game on any one player messing up. But the Bears didn't lose because Bayless Jones muffed it, or because Dante Pettis muffed it, or because Dante Pettis dropped it, or because Darnell Mooney couldn't catch it. They lost because all of those things all happened. And any of those one individually is not the sole blame for this loss. But I keep getting away from the positives. How about that huge run from Khalil Herbert? He's good, man. He is a good, instinctive, explosive running back. Like you can really see the difference in the balance between Herbert and Montgomery, where it's like Montgomery runs hard and physical and doesn't go down and bounces off of contact and just lowers the shoulder. And when it doesn't look like there's any space, like it looks like things are kind of stopped, he's always going to get you that extra 2 or 3 yards after contact. And Khalil Herbert is the guy who can turn on the jets and close a gap and hit this space that you don't even realize is there and pops out at the other side with some pretty darn good speed on the end of it. It's a really nice, fun 1-2 punch in this game. Both guys ran well. Justin Fields obviously ran really, really well. And those are, Fields rushing, and then those 2 backs are kind of the only really standout positives, I'd say, on offense in this game. Defensively, pass rushers here and there, but the blitzes really kind of be the difference maker there. Eddie Jackson made a couple of nice plays, forced that fumble. Was that on Samuel or McLaurin? I think it was on Samuel that bounced out, hit I think what one of the linebackers or defensive linemen literally bounced back into McLaurin's hands. I mean, if that ball bounces any other direction and the Bears recover it, right, that could be the difference. That could be another 3 to 7 points for the Bears. Probably more like 3 given their red zone inability. But you know what I mean? Like there were moments there. But obviously all around the team needed to be better. But you can't hang this one too much on the defense, which is marked improvement from where we were last week, right? When they made everything way too easy on Kirk Cousins. I think it's worth acknowledging that, yes, the Commanders are really bad, and Carson Wentz is not a great quarterback, and the receivers are pretty good, the running backs are pretty good, but it's worth noting that yes, the Vikings offense is a lot better than the Commanders offense, but it's still also acknowledgeable that yes, defense was a lot better than they were last week, and not nearly as vulnerable as they were last week, and kind of remind you that yeah, they can get after the quarterback when they blitz on some third downs, and they can make some plays in pass coverage overall. And run defense wasn't good enough, but they held them to 12 points. So, there's no complaints overall. The defense did its job, even if there's always things they can do better. So I guess that's something to build off of going into next week against a New England Patriots team that's coming off of a shutout. We got a really long week before we get to that game on a Monday night. So it's like a mini bye week coming up here. So we'll have our podcast schedule will be thrown off a little bit too. So Monday we'll break down the All-22 film over the weekend here because today is a recap to kind of end the week. Break down the All-22 film on Monday. We'll look at some other things across this team and across this league in the week. And then, of course, before you know it, we'll be previewing Bears Patriots, but that's another day later too. So we'll have crossover Thursday still with Locked On Patriots. We'll put together a game plan as well, and we'll have a full slate of podcasts for you. So make sure you hit that subscribe button here on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. If you watch the videos, click that bell to be notified for every video, or wherever you're listening to this podcast to make sure you're keeping up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. If you're looking for your second listen today, Locked On Bears podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network is your team every day. Locked On Bears is your first listen. Your second listen, you could get a head start with Locked On Patriots. Mike Debate does a great job over there, breaking down New England and kind of get a sense of what's going on with Bailey Zappi after their game this week against the Cleveland Browns. Otherwise, we've got all your Locked On Chicago sports teams covered. Locked On Bulls, Locked On Blackhawks, Locked On Cubs, Locked On White Sox, plus your college teams, Locked On Illini, your ranked Locked On Illini, and your Locked On Northwestern Wildcats as well. So check those out. Come back on Monday for an in-depth breakdown of this Washington game if you can stomach it. Channel your frustrations over this weekend. Take some time away from Bears football. Enjoy your football-free weekend, and we'll be back next week locked and loaded and ready for you to bear down.